That Chinese balloon that floated across the continental U.S. got a lot of attention, and somehow it eclipsed other, weirder, unidentified flying objects.
Nickel 6-1 Tango, object over. Oh, got it! Woohoo! Roger, there's troubleshooting.
Did you box moving target?
No, I took an auto track.
Oh, okay.
Oh my gosh, dude.
Wow, look at that, man. Look at the fly.
Former Navy fighter pilot Ryan Graves has a new article in Politico titled, "We Have a Real UFO Problem, and It's Not Balloons." He joins me now. Ryan, I'm with you. I mean, you've seen weirder things than a Chinese balloon while you've been in the sky, yes?
Certainly. We've seen things that we haven't been able to explain as simply a balloon. And as we've been talking about the various objects that have been shot down over the U.S., there's been a pretty clear bifurcation between what we've been calling a Chinese balloon and what these other three objects are. And while we don't know what they are, the fact of the matter is we should know what's above our head at any given time, whether it's a national security issue or whether it's a scientific question. We need to figure out what's above our heads.
That video that we just showed, was that from your squad?
Yes, that was in 2015 while we were aboard the USS Theodore Roosevelt off the coast of Jacksonville, Florida. We were doing training missions, preparing for our combat deployment. We recorded that object as well as other objects that were operating in our vicinity on a regular basis. And we simply didn't know what they were, but we did know that they were a safety hazard for our air crew and for our training missions. And we've been looking for the right way to report and deal with those issues ever since. With the Americans for Safe Aerospace, we're going to be pushing legislative action to ensure that the proper policies are in place so that pilots and aviators, both in the military and in the commercial markets, feel comfortable reporting these things, whether, again, it's a national security issue, we need to pay attention to make sure there's not security gaps, or whether there is something unknown, we need to inquire on that.
But Ryan, what was that thing?
That's what we're still trying to figure out. So what we know is that it wasn't one of our aircraft that we were operating within the vicinity of. We're fairly certain that it's not a foreign adversary at this point, but it still remains in the unknown bucket. And the primary issue here is that there are enough things that are in that bucket of unknown that the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office within the DoD and various senators and congressmen and women are looking into this matter from the angle of national security in a way we haven't had before. With the recent shootdowns, we can see just how serious of an issue it is. Even if they are just balloons can still be a national security issue when they're overhead our national security facilities and airspace.
But these things that you've seen, and in fact, I should let everybody know, you saw them a lot. This wasn't just a one-off once in 2015. You saw UFOs often. And these things, correct me if I'm wrong, they do things. They have sort of technology that you all couldn't identify.
It's not that we were just seeing them out there and somewhat identifying something in the distance. We're using a multitude of sensors on our aircraft and also distributed across multiple aircraft and different platforms that are detecting these objects within a sensor network. And so when we then correlate those radar tracks with our infrared camera systems and eventually move in closer to detect them with our eyeballs, we have high confidence in those track files and what we're experiencing. And what we're experiencing are things that we're really not sure what they are at the end of the day. They're performing a number of behaviors that we don't recognize, such as the ability to stay stationary in very high winds with no lifting platforms, no surfaces, but also to maintain speeds of 0.6 to 0.8 Mach, which is upwards of 350 knots. And they can do that for many hours on end. We don't have the ability to do that in our aircraft. And we simply don't know who's operating these or what their intent are.
I think we have another clip of one from your squadron of them seeing it, as you said, in high wind and operating differently.
Look at that thing. It's rotating.
Oh my gosh.
They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west. Look at that thing, dude.
And so when you say that you want to get to a point where people feel comfortable reporting them, do people not feel comfortable reporting these sightings?
They still don't, and I'll only speak within the aviation community, but it's a big risk to go out publicly on this topic. At the end of the day, if you're going to highlight yourself, at least in the military aviation communities, for something like this, there's very little upside for you. We're very busy aviators in the U.S. Navy, Air Force, and the military in general are very busy just doing their regular job, and they're not equipped to go out and do research on these mysterious objects. On the commercial sector, people work for a very long time in a single career at a single company, and they're a single signature away on a medical evaluation to say they're unfit for flying and to lose that career. So there's really just very little motivation to speak publicly about this, especially when it's been communicated by their employers and historically that this is a somewhat off limits topic.
Mm-hmm. And last, Ryan, do you have a theory on what these are?
Well, I have a theory of what they're not. And I do have a method, I think, of trying to figure out what these are. We know that we can detect these objects. We are starting to recognize as a government and as a society that we have an obligation to figure out what these are to ensure safe flying. And so I think we can figure it out. I think that is an answerable question, although not quite yet.
Ryan Graves, thanks for sharing all this with us. It's really fascinating, and obviously we do need to get some answers about all of this that the balloon has exposed. Thanks so much for being here.
It was my pleasure. Thank you for having me.